I'm gonna let you do your thing, and then you tell me when you're ready for me.
All right, good morning. We're grateful for you for joining us for this Preparing to Reopen. This morning, my name is Miranda Jones with the Galion-Crestline Chamber. We have Trish Factor here and Andrea Barnes from the Galion City Health Department to answer some of the questions that you might have about reopening or preparing to reopen as we have that staggered start. If you see my screen right now, it says if you want to ask a question at the button in the lower middle portion of your screen, and then type your answer and we'll get to those. There's also a poll that if you want to have these more frequently, please answer that as well. So with that, I will give it over.
All right. For anybody that has not met me yet, my name is Trish Factor. I'm the health commissioner here for the Galion City Health Department. And I know things have been very difficult for everybody amongst the COVID pandemic. But I know our businesses, big and small, have really been with this. So, you know, with the reopenings of retail and the non-essential manufacturing and everything on the horizon here in Ohio. Here at the health department, you know, one of our biggest requests for businesses, business owners and managers is really setting an example. I mean, you guys are the leaders of the business community. You're the people that people look up to, and you know, it's important that we're always consistent with health and safety messaging. So again, you know, I really feel it's important that business and community leaders set an example for their employees and as their peers who come into their businesses and modeling, you know, those best public health practices on social media, in person, everything there. So that's really what we're looking at. And I think everybody's very clear and most everybody has access to and can see the timelines that are laid out there. Effective today, non-essential surgeries and some of the healthcare aspects can be open. And then businesses in manufacturing, distribution, construction industries are then authorized to open May 4th. General offices that are authorized to open beginning May 4th as well. And then consumer, retail, and service locations on May 12th. I think a lot of the questions that we maybe have already received, so I figure I'll speak to some of those so far, is employee face coverings, the need and the methods by which you can do that, and what some of the exemptions maybe are. So I will say we've got a lot of questions. What type of masks? And again, whenever we're really relaying things, we're not talking necessarily about masks, it's face coverings. So it doesn't have to be a specific type or style of masks. It can be something as simple as the ear loop masks and everything that you see, maybe when you've gone to the doctor's office before, you've got a cough and they say, hey, here, put this on. It can be something like that. It can be the handmade, homemade ones, sew or no sew style, bandana style. There's some that we call them the sleeve style. So it almost looks like when you flipped a turtleneck up over, but it's like a sleeve that covers. The big thing is that it covers the nose, mouth, and if it's mask style, that it covers that chin area. Again, the whole purpose behind masking is so that your respiratory droplets aren't going out. Again, the masks are to protect others, not necessarily you, unless you have one of those N95 style masks that are really more reserved right now for healthcare workers and such. It's one of those things where if we are asking patrons, and again, it is highly recommended that any of your patrons coming into your businesses are wearing masks as well, because by them wearing it, it's protecting your staff and in turn their families. You know, we don't want your businesses to freshly reopen and then have to close because you've got so many ill staff members and such. That's not what we want. We're trying to avoid that. So again, setting the good example, making sure that your folks have those on. And again, it is required for employees unless they meet one of the following exemptions. And those exemptions are laid out fairly clearly. But it's if an employee in a particular position is prohibited by law or regulation from wearing a face covering while on the job. There are very, very limited, but there are some regulations where you can't have your face covered doing some styles of work. Wearing a face covering on the job is against documented industry best practices. So if in your industry, there are best practice documents from your authorities that state face coverings are not approved to be worn during this style of work, it's a safety concern, things along those lines. Then also if it's not advisable for health purposes, some of your staff may have health indications where wearing a mask would make breathing far more difficult and they maybe are not able to. And if wearing a face covering is a violation of a company's safety policies. So if there's a safety policy that you already had in place, such as in manufacturing, if it's a safety thing, not being able to hear through a muffled mask perhaps, and you have team lifts, things along those lines. Again, if it's already a documented safety policy, not just one thrown together for this. If an employee is sitting alone in an enclosed workspace, so if you have your own office, you don't have to have your mask on in that office. If the last exemption there is if it's a practical reason that a face covering cannot be worn by an employee. If the practicality is that it's so hot, everybody's so sweaty that causes the mask to become wet and no longer effective. If it's outdoor workers and it's raining, when the mask becomes wet and it's not effective, or you can no longer breathe clearly through it, those are some of the practical reasons that we're looking at. Not just it's hot and it's uncomfortable, it's does it make the mask ineffective? You know, if you're working with maybe somebody that's hard of hearing and they need to read lips and you don't have a mask that has the clear pouch in the front where they can read your lips, that would be a practical example. So I mean, those are kind of the exemptions on that. You can request that any patrons wear masks. And I mean, to me, if a business is asking me to wear a mask and simply stating that this is for the protection of our staff and their families so that we can continue to provide services, I think that's one good messaging piece that I would recommend. Again, it's not required under the new orders and everything, but it's definitely something to really push out there. Andy, have you gotten any other common questions?
Just whether plastic face shields would be acceptable in lieu of masks for the employees.
Yeah, so the plastic face shields or the guards that can kind of come down, not necessarily like welders' helmets, but they do kind of look like it, although they're all plastic, all clear. And those, in our discussions in certain industries are fine and approved. But if there are exemptions that you're seeking, if there is an industry best practice, things like that, if you send that to us, that way we have that information ahead of time, it would also help us. And Miranda will send out my email address during the course of this or right after, and you can send me that just so that it's documented if we do get complaints, because when in enforcing these orders, it's something that it's very helpful if we already have the background and the information without having to go out on every call if there are questions. I will say too, with a lot of this, educating your staff is key. in the first rollouts for some of the businesses that have already been open, there's been a lot of concerns from employees and asking questions. My employer's not doing this, but it's recommended. There was the recommendations versus the requirements and a lot of educating of employees on that end. So really trying to push out as much information to your employees and saying, this is, we've talked to the health department, we're able to do this. This is what we need to do. This is what we're trying to do. We're doing a best faith effort on this. And we've got people 6 feet apart. We've got masks, they're being provided, this type of thing. But, really making sure that they're aware of what measures you have put into place and how they're supposed to be able to utilize it. Because some employees maybe have contacted because other employees are not following the rules or regulations. And that does come back on the employer if they're not able to enforce it. So that's something to keep in mind there. Some of the other, sorry, Miranda, are you getting any questions? You're muted, hon.
I know. I'm muted. We just had the one, and honestly, the Chambers has this question as well. So as we come up on graduation party season and all of that, we have venues that thrive on booking those parties, or people who have graduates, or in our case, our beloved Joe is retiring, and we had a retirement party scheduled for him. So moving forward with that, like May, June, what do you think?
Well, in terms of May, so the new orders were posted just before midnight. So they have extended the stay-at-home order through 29th of May, which also means that any gathering of more than 10 people is still being prohibited. So when we're looking at venues that are booking for more than 10 folks, it's not going to be allowed unless it's for purposes covered under the business exemptions and such.
Okay. And then another question that we have is golf outings. I know we talked about that before we started this, but golfing has been one of those things that they've kind of allowed. But in terms of an outing in late June, what do you think?
Late June's a little hard to totally pin down, but at this point right now, even going golfing, the golf courses are really supposed to have certain measures in place in order to allow golfing to occur. Many have gotten rid of the flags. That way multiple people aren't touching the flagpole and such. Golf carts, if they utilize them, they have to be disinfected between each person, as well as we have to maintain the 6-foot social distancing measures. So again, unless they're in the same household, they're not in the same cart. So golf outings, the way that we've done them in the past, the way that we've envisioned them, and multiple people in the cart and everybody together and everything, it's most likely, if it occurs, it's not going to look the same. It will definitely not be the same vibe. I am not 100% sure, and I definitely cannot tell the future. The COVID crystal ball is very, very cloudy. So, we're doing our best as the information comes out. We at the health department, we're hearing most of this the same time everybody else is during press conferences, and we read the orders when they come out. We don't get them ahead of time. So we get them, we're interpreting them, we're speaking with some of our counterparts in other counties, and really trying to clarify and get things as consistent as possible across the state for enforcement of things. So that's something to really keep in mind. We're getting information daily, sometimes a couple times a day, and really clarifying things as much as possible. So obviously, if you're watching this in Facebook land, or if you have Facebook, we do try to put as many updates as possible on the Galion City Health Department's Facebook page. And I know Miranda's putting a lot of information out through the Chambers pages as well, and various social media outlets, as well as through email. for information specific to businesses and some of the financial aspects there. But in terms of how the orders have to be enforced and such, we're really trying to clarify that and push that out as much as possible. And again, bear with us. We'll do our best to answer any questions that we can. But I think this type of outlet is something where if there's multiple questions and as we go along, things are going to get a little cloudy. The waters are going to get a little murky because there's very specific questions that some folks may have. Some businesses don't always fit necessarily into one single mold. So there may be particular questions, and that's something that both myself and Andy there are very clear and able to answer. We communicate regularly. I'm not in the same office as Andy. We're not even in the same building. We're really distanced, but we do communicate on a regular basis too. So if you get a response from me, it should be the same response that you would get from her.
We did have a question come in. So although private clubs are closed, are they allowed to have meetings with 10 or less?
Hey, Andy, do you want to go forth on that part?
The restaurants, if that's what they're talking about, I don't know.
It's the private club, so like your Elks and your Moose and your Owls and those kind of establishments.
Well, so I'll touch on.
It still says public or private gatherings of 10 or more are.
So if they have less than 10, what do you?
Well, so here's the thing on non-essential businesses. So those that are not open yet. So closed businesses and operations. So those places that are not technically supposed to be open yet under these regulations, they are still able to do things for minimum basic operations. So any activity, business or operation, if they're ordered to be closed, they're still permitted to engage in some of these operations. So basic minimum operations include things like being able to provide employees, well, basically they still have to maintain social distancing requirements. So they still have to meet all of that. But they can be in there to operate for minimum necessary activities that maintain the value of the business's inventory, preserving the condition of the business's physical plant, equipment, those types of things, ensuring security, processing payroll or benefits, those types of related functions there. And then also minimum necessary activities to facilitate employees of the business being able to continue to work remotely from the residences. So again, it's not specific to private clubs and such. But if the private club, again, if it is a facility where they need to do some basic maintenance pieces and such so that they need to run the AC systems. They need to do those types of checks. They have some people on payroll maybe that are doing some of their outreach. For example, if Miranda was working for a private club or was the president of a private club and they were trying to push out information to folks, and the only way that she had this video conferencing ability is at the club and to push that information out, she would be able to go in there. Again, if there was somebody else that was maybe doing the filming or recording, 6-foot separation, those types of things, they could do something like that. But again, that's just bare minimum. Going in just to meet and do non-essential functions is not okay.
So let's say we'll use the chamber as an example. So let's say that we need to have like a executive committee meeting, and there's only 5 on the executive committee plus me. Are we allowed to hold a meeting like in our conference room as long as social distancing is maintained between those 6 people? Because and the reason I'm saying is because like in our bylaws, we have to have X numbers of meetings. So to me, that is a function of our organization. And I'm sure these private clubs as well, they have officers and they need to have meetings and that kind of thing. So I think that might be kind of where they were going with the question. I don't know.
I would say if you're doing that, you would have to be masked.
Okay.
Everyone would have to wear masks. All the essential requirements or required measures in this would have to be met. Because we're going to get complaints. We've already gotten complaints of people doing this anyway with the previous order. And it's very hard to determine why you're there. I mean, they can say, yeah, it's, we're just doing some financial pieces that so it's going to be very hard to determine. So I would say you just have to follow all the required measures and keep less than 10 people.
Okay.
And
we do have
I would definitely say though, I would recommend if you can utilize an outlet like this, doing a virtual meeting. That's our Board of Health is meeting virtually, City Council's meeting virtually. It's definitely the preferred method. It is the safest method. And just to kind of tack on to that, Andy did say you would still need to meet all the same types of requirements, be masked, be 6 feet apart, have sanitization products, disinfect prior to, after, all those types of things. But I would say you really need to consider the individuals that are in there in that meeting. If anybody is high risk and you're forcing them to be there for a meeting, even if you don't feel like you're a high risk individual, you could be putting others at risk. So do take that type of piece into consideration.
All right, we did have something on this side from someone that says, as we are preparing to return to work, do you have any suggestions for bulk orders of PPE, mask, gloves, as to where we can order it and how? We know it's short nationwide, but maybe a lead on a supply company.
We do not have any direct leads on supply companies, at least internally, for bulk orders like that. The bulk orders for response agencies and such, like the health department, nursing homes, first responders, those entities are really being pushed through Crawford County EMA. And so they're able to find maybe some resources that way. However, what I have seen, and not to throw this on you, Miranda, but what I have seen from a few other chamber offices is they have looked, because there do seem to be some organizations or some companies that will sell some of the PPE and sell some of the hand sanitizer and such, but they're in large quantities and it's far more than any one small business and such needs. So I have seen some chamber offices that have gone through and said, who needs what, and let's do a bulk order and divide the cost out amongst those that have kind of done the pre-order. And I think that's a great practice. I don't know how feasible it is, or again, what the actual need is from chamber members, if there is that need. Obviously there may be one if there was one question there. Go ahead, Andy.
One other thing, I know people are saying gloves, but is not a substitute for the hand sanitizer in this order. So
No.
have the hand sanitizer, technically you're not allowed to open.
Can you repeat that? I didn't get it. If you don't have hand sanitizer, you can't open?
Not open.
Oh, okay. I got plenty.
You have to have those minimum measures in place in order to open. Your staff have to have them. Your staff have to have the face coverings. You have to be able to do the social distancing measures, however that may be. You have to be able to perform the daily symptom assessments on your staff. You have to require regular hand washing. You have to have hand sanitizers in high contact locations. And actually, I'm gonna try this whole fun Zoom thing. I think there's a way for me. I'm gonna share a screen. Hopefully this works. Okay, so this is just one example. So for customer retail and services, are you able to see that screen, guys?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So those mandatory pieces there have to be met. If you can't meet them, you cannot operate. And it's, unfortunately, it is as simple as that. If you cannot meet these requirements, you can't function yet. If you haven't been able to get some of the supplies in, unfortunately, that magic date that's set for your type of business may not be able to be open on that exact day. So customers and guests, things that they need to do, and all of these documents I will also send over to Miranda. She'll be able to send out as well to everybody, although they are all available on the coronavirus.ohio.gov website. Physical spaces, everything like that in there. In terms of it, this is one key thing right here that I'm spotting that I have had a couple common questions on is the physical space. What are some of the high contact surfaces that we're looking at? And why do they want us to stagger people coming in, stagger start times and stagger breaks and such? One of the big things is what do we all touch when we come inside? We touch the doorknob, we touch a keypad for those doors that have security access and such. And also when we are coming into a building, if there's multiple people trying to come in at the same time, the odds of you being able to maintain that 6 foot of social distance can sometimes be difficult. So people staggering coming in, not crowding each other when you're coming in, those types of things. Breaks being staggered, again, break rooms, if everybody's touching the same microwave handle and it's not being wiped down in between, again, it's another high touch surface area. Break rooms and such are another a common question that we've had, and that's one of those things where if you typically have a whole lot of people at a single table or in a confined space, again, they're going to be eating, so masks are going to be off. It's very difficult to control that type of environment. So staggering breaks so that there are fewer people, they're able to be spread out more, and also so that there's time to disinfect surfaces, the tables, the chairs, the refrigerator handle, microwave handle, those types of things. And I will say, I know it is difficult, and I did speak to even one business this morning. They are doing things like that. They have staggered because they have been in operation, but then they've run into when people are going out for something like a smoke break, they're huddled in together right outside the door. No, you can't do that. So trying to enforce or having some types of policies in place that they can't do some of these types of things. It is very difficult, and I fully understand how difficult it can be to enforce some of this with your employees. But that's just one of those things to really look at, and on that establishing maximum capacity. If you are a building that is relatively small and you do have a max fire code, this is something that, you know, a lot of restaurants are looking at, and that folks are looking at, you know, in the future as we look to eventually open restaurants back up for dine-in seating and such, looking at what is 50% of your average capacity. So what do you normally have? Can you reduce it down some? How can we do that? Whether it is staggering, altering shifts, reducing the amount of shifts, sometimes on the reducing of the amount of shifts, that can also give the opportunity to do the deep clean, those deep disinfection processes without people being right there and in the mix and kind of negating some of that.
We do have a question about, well, I guess clarification for the content of hand sanitizer. Is there a percentage of alcohol in it, or what if somebody bought some that it says alcohol free?
60% or more. Correct, Andy?
Yes, but I don't know that it's specified in this order, so I would say.
Right, it's not specified in the order, but in order to kill germs, that is what we have really pushed out there. And again, hand sanitizers are only as effective as the correct and proper use. But in order to actually kill certain viruses, it does have to be at least 60%. I would say if it's alcohol free, if it's less than 60%, again, you may be paying for it to meet what you think is a standard. But in my personal opinion, it would be wasting your money because it's not effective.
Another question is, we have someone that provides a service such as cleaning to an essential worker. Are they allowed? So if it's a cleaning company, are they allowed to go into that resident's home to clean because they're an essential worker, or what do you advise?
Again, if it is essential, here I'm gonna stop the share on that. If it is essential that individual has, again, if this is a private residence and they need the assistance, yes, they can be in there. Again, I would preface it by saying they should probably ask a few questions, not only of, well, the company as well as the individual receiving the service should both ask a few questions. You know, are you symptomatic? You know, doing some temperature checks, things like that, being able to say, no, I'm good right now. Also wearing the mask. If you're comfortable, again, they are your customer or your client. If they are at the residence when you're cleaning, potentially asking them and providing them, you know, are you able to wear a mask? Or if you're going to be there, are you going to be in a separate area closed off from where I'm providing the service? That type of thing. Yes, they can be in there. Again, if it's something that is essential and necessary, you know, there are a lot of individuals that are not able to provide the services within their own home or do that for themselves. So it is something that is deemed necessary. It was in the first round. They've already been providing these types of services throughout as an essential service. So they can, but again, making sure that any staff that work in that type of setting are certainly protecting themselves. I mean, that's going to be a huge thing. Consistent and constant hand washing, donning a mask, you know, making sure that the products that you're using are properly disinfecting and such. So Andy's got her 60% alcohol hand sanitizer, it looks like.
So
I just touched my nose. That's what.
If you ever see us reaching and starting to do that, you know, if we're brushing hair away or things like that, that's where we're going through it, even on our desks. So
I had some questions last night after we posted we were doing this about, because that whole, like, the governor extended the stay-at-home order through May, and everyone's like, well, I thought businesses were opening. So you're still having the staggering of business openings with the stay-at-home order. Can you explain a little bit more with that? Because I'm not the professional on it, so.
Right. And again, with that, not all businesses are being open. And you know, I think that's something that people have really taken note of, is not everybody is back open. There were a lot of questions in regards to, you know, okay, they're opening manufacturing, but were many of them open already? Yes, if they were essential, they were. So it's those baby steps and slowly but surely opening more and more and being able to do that. What the stay-at-home order is trying to do is stop unnecessary interactions. So things that are not essential. Eventually, you are going to need to go. I mean, many of us, I think all three of us that are on camera right now, I can say we all have kids. We do. They're sitting there. I think we all have boys too. The feet grow really quickly. My son doesn't fit in any of his shoes in just a month that we've been here. So eventually, yes, on the 12th, I might be donning a mask and getting him a pair of shoes. So, you know, there are some things like that they're looking at. Again, a lot of it is economically driven. If the economy totally crashes, it's far more difficult to bring the country back out of something like that. Obviously, we've taken a large deep dive. It's very apparent to everybody. Economically, the hits just keep coming, but we're not bottomed. So by slowly integrating more and more businesses, that's going to help with the economic drive. Now, the unnecessary, bringing together of groups of people, still not allowing mass gatherings and such, what that's doing is reducing the spread. Again, we've seen this, from some of the widespread testing in prisons and in other states. There's a large number of individuals that are asymptomatic, meaning they have no signs or symptoms. They have it and they're able to spread it. So even coming into large groups like that, it's very difficult to know whether or not you're spreading it. So by reducing it and not bringing folks together, you're limiting that spread until there's further things that can be done. And again, a lot of the businesses that are open, that is the reason why some of these restrictions are being put into place. So yes, if you're in a general office setting, you can be there, but they're still saying if you can telecommute, continue to do so. Okay. But if you can't, if there's no provisions to be able to do so, then you can be in there if you're wearing a mask, if you're doing this, if you've got the social distancing measures in place. So it's restrictive. And then as we go on, some restrictions may start being lifted. Other businesses may be able to open and more travel and interaction in between folks will be able to open as well and spread there.
Trish, we just had a question, and it was, can a business require customers to wear a facial covering? And I said, yes, they can. A business can require whatever they want for their customers.
That's my understanding. Again, if businesses have legal consult that they would want to ask on any legal ramifications, yes. Again, it's very similar to businesses that simply put up no shirt, no shoes, no service. Okay, if it's no shirt, no shoes, no mask, no service, I'm all for it. Again, when you're asking your customers to wear a mask, you're asking them to protect your staff. Again, the mask is not for me, the mask is to protect you. So by your staff wearing the masks, you're protecting each other. When you're working in the same spaces, you're also protecting your customers by your staff not getting their respiratory droplets on others. However, if your customers are coming in and are not wearing masks, well, they're not protecting you. It's truly, I like some of the analogies that I've heard is, it's truly a respect thing. Do you respect our business? You obviously want to be here. You want to be a consumer. If you want us to continue to operate and to thrive as a business, respect our staff, respect our staff's family members and everything, because you don't know if you have this. You could be asymptomatic. So protect us so we can continue to serve you. And I think that's a great way to look at it. There are still some, a number of businesses that are restricting, again, the number of individuals coming in. A lot of grocery stores and such have said, one adult, you don't need to bring the whole family. I will say I was extremely disheartened at, again, just my personal experience. I had to go to the grocery store yesterday and I saw full families with multiple kids, like 5+ kids running around touching everything, no masks, no nothing. And it's those types of things. If you have 2 adults, one adult, if they can stay with the kids, that type of thing. I fully understand. I'm a single mother as well. If my kids were younger, I wouldn't leave them at home by themselves. And I had to bring both of them with me. Yes, there are circumstances where you really can't control that type of thing. But unnecessarily exposing is something that's very difficult. But a number of businesses have put restrictions. Of course, you have to be very cognizant that there are some exemptions. One of the reasons why the initial push to have all customers required to wear masks. Again, everybody's well aware of this. I know it's one of those the dark clouds looming over some of these press conferences. Is on Monday, it was consumers as well as employees had to wear masks. although it's very difficult to limit and look at each customer and what their potential exemptions would be. You know, if they have some of those medical limitations where they could not wear a mask safely, how do you document that? How do you do that? So it is one of those where you can express that. You can say, yes, we request that you wear a mask, you know, no shoes, no shirt, no mask, no entry. And if you have alternatives, you know, if you don't want to wear a mask, place your order and you can pick up curbside, you know, things like that. There's a number of businesses that have been operating curbside services. It's definitely not the same on the consumer level, but if they don't want to help protect your staff, their family members, which in turn protects your business, you have to make some concessions there. Like, okay, we can do this for individuals that don't want to abide by these limitations that we feel are necessary for the safety of our workforce.
We had a question come in. So as an essential worker, working from home since the beginning of these orders, running out of hand sanitizers and cleaners and having difficulty finding supplies. Do you have any suggestions on where to get any?
I wish I did. You know, I think even in our department, we have one individual that has just, you know, done great searching multiple sites and looking. And I mean, it does take some digging, especially if you don't need a large quantity. There are some companies that have supplies that have sanitization products and everything, but they want to sell in large quantities. I know, and I don't know the name of the group, but I was made privy to this. So some of the restaurant supply groups, some of the let me see, some of the larger business toiletry supplies and everything like that, where they typically only produce and sell in large quantities, they're opening that up to some smaller businesses and such. Again, you have to think outside the box and you have to look at suppliers that are not your norm.
Right.
I do always,
you know, is the Iron Vault Distillery selling to the public? Do you ladies know?
My understanding is that they are. My understanding is that they are when they have availability. Again, they like many others have my understanding, again, I could be incorrect here, but the initial push was to do this for a lot of the first responders and such. Again, because many businesses were not open at the time. I would contact them directly though and find out. I will say when you start getting some sanitizers and such, even if you're looking at Iron Vault or some of the other distilleries that are starting to produce some of this, it is slightly different. It's not the same kind of gel sanitizer that you're used to getting from Bath and Body Works and things like that. It's thinner, so it's not like a gel. It's more liquidy. So you will see it and you'll feel it slightly different. You'll go through it at a different rate. So be very cognizant of those types of things. But again, I mean, if we do hear of any large vendors for things, I will definitely push that out over to Miranda. And that's something where, again, if it seems to be a need, and maybe this is something that we can work with the chamber office on too, is if that seems to be one of the biggest issues in businesses becoming open again, is not having some of those products. Again, maybe like what some of the other chamber offices have done is if they'll only sell in bulk orders, maybe that's something multiple businesses can go in on and do something like that. Again, that seems to be kind of the common thread. Even some health departments are going in on certain things together, or working with some of the other long-term care facilities or hospitals in order to get supplies, because they're only available either in bulk or very, very limited quantities.
We just had a chat thing that Julie said that the Walmart in Bucyrus had sanitizer yesterday, but one per customer. So, and keep that in mind too when you're going shopping. I know some of your cleaning supplies, sanitizers, they're limiting how many per person. So
Yeah, and that's something too, look at what some of your policies and such are internally. If you talk to your staff and you're running low on sanitizer and they're at the store, are you able to ask them, pick it up and we can reimburse you? Do you have payroll and reimbursement policies that allow for something like that? Not everybody does, but if you have the ability to do something like that, great. And keep an eye out and tell others, hey, we've got this, let's try that. So I think those types of things are pertinent, and everybody kind of has to pitch in order to get back in the workforce and get the businesses open.
we're gonna wrap up soon because it's about 1:45. So if you have any other questions, if you could ask them now or drop them in the chat or the Q&A. Otherwise, I'm gonna throw the poll up and see how we're doing. So I've got some pretty good response on that. Anybody that hasn't done the poll, it's at the bottom of your screen in the middle. Just click on that and let us know how you feel about doing another one of these or recurring ones in the future as new orders come available.
Always new information constantly. I will say too, I did push some info over, sent it out to Miranda on some of our checklists and such. There are some checklists that are available for businesses and employers. There's some tips and tricks too for essential workers that are returning home, things that they can do upon returning home that I think are just great, cleaning high touch surfaces like their countertops, doorknobs, things like that at home. Not wearing your shoes through the house, those types of things that are kind of best practices that have been shared out and among.
I think the one that you said that got me the most was not wearing an excess of jewelry or accessories like that, because you bring them back in and they've been exposed. I guess I didn't even consider that. So that was a good tip for me. Yeah,
it's, if you have the ability to have, we call it kind of a hot zone, a warm zone, and then a cool zone. We look at it very similar to like chemical decontamination. When you get home, if you've got an area where you can just kind of disrupt things, put it right into the washing machine, do that. That's great. That way everything's kind of washed right away. You're not tracking anything in with your shoes in and across. But yeah, definitely the same thing when you have watches on and rings and things like that. If you're using hand sanitizer, if you're washing your hands and such, yeah, maybe your rings will get it, but there's always cracks and crevices. But are you washing your watch?
Are you sanitizing your phone?
Yes, and there are different methods for sanitizing your phone. I know I'm touching mine constantly, so there are different methods out there. And if there are certain topics that folks would like to hear about, toss it in the chat real quick. If it's tips and tricks to share with your employees, if it's common questions that you already have, let Miranda know, and we can certainly try to cover as many topics as we can. Again, I think it's a good opportunity for us to be able to answer some of these questions in bulk. Again, we are a small department. Andy, she looks like a very nice person, and she is. But she is the one that is tasked with enforcing a lot of this. So it is not an easy task for her. So if there are questions, if there's things that we can do to try to mitigate issues, by educating your employees, by educating you, making sure that you know how you can do things safely and responsibly, it's going to help you in the long run, and it's also going to help us. So, I will say it's twofold in that, but, trying to reduce questions that maybe, multiple people have. So that's a good thing.
We don't have any other questions, but the last thing someone just said, it was very informative, and yes, would be interested in taking part in additional meetings, especially when we get to open in-person eating and bars.
Oh yeah.
Does
All right.
anybody, last chance for questions or chat? Anybody?
I did. I got an email while we were on this from the safety service director, and she said that like to check out places like the office supply places for hand sanitizer and stuff, because I think she found something through Staples.
Mm-hmm.
FYI.
Look at suppliers that you don't necessarily, if you can't get things through your normal suppliers, think outside the box. You know, that there's places that have some random random things that you didn't even realize that they had out there.
Right.
We're working in very odd times now, so we got to get creative. We got to think outside the box. And I think one of the big things too is we have to be able to pull together. You know, again, if you find a vendor and it's, I have to buy this much, but I mean, it's a great product, great price and everything. I'm sure if you send it to Miranda and she sends it out, other people maybe are looking for the same types of resources and being able to work together, you know, whether you're competitors or not, or, you know, we're all in this together. So being able to help each other out in that respect is going to be key. That's the only way that we're all going to get through this is working together to bring everything back to that sense of normalcy and keeping as many people safe and healthy as we can.
Okay, last question that came in is there anything as a cleaning company that they could do or offer for the community?
Well, you know, if you want to come clean my bathrooms and everything, you know, if there are tips and tricks that they have, you know, if they say, you know, when we go in and typically go and clean a home or clean a business, these are the things that we do on a daily basis. These are the things that we do on a weekly basis normally. But during this outbreak, we're being asked to, you know, disinfect or clean keyboards and mouse pads and doorknobs and things like that. So, you know, if there are key tips and tricks that maybe they can share, you know, did you ever think about how often you touch the doorway? You know, how many people lean up against a doorway when they're talking to somebody in an office setting? How many people don't wipe those types of surfaces down?
I would say too, for a cleaning service, that might be an option for people who can't get the supplies. They could offer to come in 2-3 times a day and do frequently touched surfaces.
Yeah. High touch surfaces.
Okay, any other questions or chat or anything? Last call, sorry. All right, if not, you can always send them to me after and I'll get them over. But I do want to thank Trish and Andrea for joining us today. I think we are going to do these more often. We have the capability to do them, or if you have any other topics you want to discuss, let us know.
Yep. And we can set up, you know, again, if there are questions that you have regularly, send them through Miranda, or we can set up a SurveyMonkey specifically for questions from businesses that Miranda can send the link out to, so that we can collect some of those and maybe at the beginning of some of these, you know, here's the answers that we had to these, or if it's something more urgent, we can kind of push that information out prior to. But I think that's one of those things where we can certainly try to address as many questions as people have on an ongoing basis. And sometimes during these meetings, you don't always think of those questions, but you're like, as soon as it ends, wish I would have asked this, or yeah.
All right, I don't have anything else, so thank you. We appreciate this, and we'll do this again soon.
All right, thanks everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks.